The Prime Overlord stood at the edge of the observation dome aboard the command vessel Vraxian. His eyes, pale and wide-set, swept over the blue-green planet below. Earth. He had seen 1,000 worlds, conquered 500, extinguished resistance with the efficiency of a glacial tide. But this one irked him. "Explain it again," he said without turning, voice low. Behind him, Supreme Strategist Kelvar adjusted his translation crest. "They refused to execute the surrendering Krovaxians, my overlord, even after the Krovaxians laid waste to 2 of their cities. The humans not only spared them, they took them in, fed them." The Prime Overlord narrowed his gaze. "Fed them? Yes, Overlord. They provided medical assistance. One of them even carried a wounded Krovaxian soldier through a minefield." Silence held for several seconds. Then the Overlord turned, robes shifting like shadowed smoke. "Why?" Kelvar hesitated, as if the answer might offend. "They said it was the right thing to do." The Overlord's jaw twitched. "Prepare a ground observation unit. I want eyes on them. I want to understand what makes them so." "Defective." Yarrick Amsel ducked behind a slab of collapsed concrete, clutching the rifle close to his chest. His breath came in short, sharp bursts, not from panic though the situation warranted it, but from the shrapnel wound in his side. Blood seeped through his shirt, warm and sticky, but he couldn't stop yet. Across the ruined plaza, nestled between a snapped support beam and a crumbled kiosk, lay a Krovaxian. Not dead. Not yet. The alien's thin limbs trembled and its gills fluttered erratically. Purple ichor pooled beneath it. Yarrick swore under his breath. The Krovaxians had landed 3 days ago, unannounced, hostile, and heavily armed. That one had probably killed civilians, maybe soldiers, but it was breathing. Alone, unarmed, he looked back at the scorched path he'd taken. The exit was behind him. A medic tent, maybe 100 meters away, he could make it, but he didn't move. Instead, he crawled forward. "Don't shoot," Yarrick said, raising one hand as he neared the Krovaxian. "I'm not here to finish the job." The Krovaxian's eye membranes fluttered. "Why?" "Because you're bleeding out and I'm not in the mood to watch someone die, even you." The alien's chest convulsed in what might have been a laugh or a cough. "You are human?" "Yeah, unfortunately." Yarrick slipped the rifle onto his back, pulled off his jacket, and pressed it against the open wound in the alien's side. "This is gonna hurt." The Krovaxian jolted. "You are helping me. Why? I ask myself that every time I get shot," Yarrick muttered. "Save your energy." By the time he hauled the alien to its feet, the pain in his own side had become a roar. The world tilted, but he forced his legs to move. Step, breathe, step, breathe. The Prime Overlord watched the footage in silence. The feed came from a micro-drone invisible to human eyes. The human this Yarrick had risked his life for an enemy, not a strategic prisoner, not a diplomat, a foot soldier. "You see," Kelvar gestured at the screen, "they are unreliable. They lack logical cohesion." "Their compassion overrides quiet," the Overlord said. He watched Yarrick stumble into the medic tent, the Krovaxian half draped over his back. The medics rushed forward, shouting orders, grabbing supplies. One of them caught Yarrick as he collapsed. "Did he survive?" the Overlord asked. Kelvar checked the log. "Yes, both did. The human underwent surgery, broken rib, shrapnel injury, punctured lung. He's currently recovering, slowly." The Overlord leaned closer to the screen, eyes narrowing. "I want him." Kelvar blinked. "As a specimen?" As a question. 2 weeks later, Yarrick Amsel sat upright in a reinforced chair, arms bound, ribs still wrapped under his shirt. He wasn't in a hospital anymore. The walls were too smooth, too quiet. The air had no scent. "What is this? Some kind of alien prison?" he muttered, squinting under the harsh overhead lights. A door hissed open. It wasn't a door in the traditional sense, more like a seamless piece of the wall evaporated into vapor. The being that entered was tall, robed, and clearly not here for small talk. Yarrick leaned back. "Let me guess, you're the boss." "I am the Prime Overlord of the Vraxi Dominion." "Wow, that sounds exhausting." The Overlord ignored the jab. "You risked your life to save a Krovaxian." Yarrick shrugged, then winced. "Yeah, I did." What's it to you? They are your enemies. They surrendered, there's a difference. The Overlord circled him slowly. And if he had killed your comrades, maybe he did. Doesn't mean I get to play judge, jury, and executioner while he's bleeding out. You confuse me, the Overlord admitted. Good, maybe that'll slow you down. The Overlord paused. You would defend them again if I had to, yeah. Even if it cost you your life, Yarrick took a breath. If I died doing the right thing, I'd rather that than live doing the wrong one. The Overlord stared at him, long, unblinking. Then, without a word, he left. Kelvar met the Overlord in the corridor. What did you learn? He is not unique, the Overlord said. I have studied the footage. Others did the same. Medics, civilians, soldiers. They protect even those who have harmed them. They do not always, but often enough. Kelvar frowned. That makes them weak. No, the Overlord said. That makes them unpredictable. Over the next few weeks, the Vraxi Dominion launched probes across human territories. They observed, recorded, analyzed. One clip showed a human child shielding a wounded Cernok, an alien who had detonated a bomb just hours earlier. Another showed a firefighter pulling a Krovaxian out of a collapsed building during a retreat. Each clip made the Overlord more still. Why? He asked aloud as he reviewed yet another footage of human aid workers tending to enemy combatants. Why do they do this? No answer came. Yarrick, meanwhile, had been moved to a more hospitable chamber. No chains, real food, a cot. His injuries were healing slowly. The rib still ached and the scar on his side throbbed when he turned too fast. He was sitting on the cot, nursing a bowl of what passed for soup when the door dissolved again. This time it wasn't the Overlord, it was the Krovaxian he'd saved. The alien stood awkwardly in the entrance. They said I could come. Yarrick set the bowl down. You made it. Yes. Because of you. Don't get used to it, Yarrick muttered. I'm not exactly a saint. The Krovaxian stepped closer. I did kill humans, I will not lie, but I was following orders. I regret it now. Yarrick nodded slowly. Yeah, regret's funny like that. Shows up late. I wish to help you. Yarrick raised an eyebrow. Help me do what? The Krovaxian hesitated. Confuse the Overlord. Yarrick let out a dry laugh. Well, that's already happening. The Prime Overlord stood alone in the Hall of Strategy, walls lined with holograms of Conquest's past. He stared at Earth's projection, watching it rotate slowly in the void. It will not fall as the others did, he said. Kelvar approached. We have superior weapons. Shall I give the order? No, the Overlord said. Their strength is not in their weapons. It is in this flaw. This irrational mercy, if we strike them, they will defend even us. Kelvar's face twisted. That is not strength. That is the problem, the Overlord replied. It is strength. Just not one we understand. In the following days, more captured soldiers were released. The humans welcomed them, fed them, gave them shelter. Even those who had committed atrocities were offered trials, not execution. The Dominion's spies reported mass confusion among their own ranks. Some of the Vraxi soldiers began defecting, some began questioning orders. And some, like the Krovaxian Yarrick had saved, began working with humans to prevent further bloodshed. One morning, the Prime Overlord summoned his generals. The conquest is halted, he said. Silence rippled across the chamber. Kelvar stepped forward. You cannot mean that. The Overlord's expression did not change. I have seen the future of this war. We will win battles, but we will lose the purpose. We will become what they are, Kelvar hissed. Compassionate, divided, the Overlord said. And that will be our end. He turned to the stars once more. Let Earth be. End of Part 1. The Krovaxian, known now only as Vel, crept through the auxiliary maintenance corridor of the Dominion outpost orbiting Earth's shadow side. The passage was narrow and unlit, lined with exposed conduits and coolant pipes. His breathing apparatus clicked softly every few seconds. He had memorized each turn, each low beam, each sudden drop in elevation. He had walked this route in simulation a dozen times. Now it was real. The human trailing behind him was less graceful. Yarick's boot caught a bundle of cable and he barely caught himself before slamming into a bulkhead. "You all right?" Vel whispered, antennae twitching. Yarick exhaled through his teeth. "Every part of me that used to be metal is now bruised. You are mostly soft tissue. Thanks for the reminder." They rounded the last bend and Vel crouched beside an access panel. His webbed fingers hovered over its lock. "Once we're inside, do not speak unless I cue you." "I make no promises," Yarick muttered. The panel hissed open. The chamber beyond was small, sterile, and silent. A single dim light pulsed above a wide table cluttered with alien instruments. A Dominion researcher stood over the far end, hunched, long spine undulating with each breath. Beside him, bound to a vertical frame, hung a creature Yarick didn't recognize. It was humanoid but not human. Skin like a night sky, 4 eyes, 2 of which were swollen shut, chains pinched at its limbs. The air stank of antiseptic and something sharp. Vel stepped into the room. "Dr. Farron." The researcher turned, startled. "You're not cleared to be here." "I brought you a test subject." Farron's gaze snapped to Yarick. "Human, recovered from surface conflict." "Still recovering." Yarick didn't speak, but his jaw locked tight. Farron approached. His posture was too fluid, too eager. "You brought him here voluntarily, unconscious, recovered from crash debris. I thought you would want to compare him to the others." Farron pressed a long metallic digit against Yarick's temple. "He's intact." Yarick didn't flinch. "I can hear you, you know." Farron's head tilted. "It speaks?" "Barely," Yarick said, eyes darting toward the restrained being. "What's that one done to earn your hospitality?" Farron took a step back. "That is a Relun. They sabotaged one of our terraformers, killed 17 engineers." The creature moaned. Yarick's voice dropped. "So now it's your turn." Interrogation is standard procedure. "Looks like dissection." Farron turned to Vel. "Why is it talking?" Vel didn't answer. Yarick stepped forward. "Because I'm not a bag of meat, and neither is that thing you've got chained up." "You call this research? That thing is a war criminal. Then put it on trial." Farron's spines flared. "We don't try enemies, we extract what is useful." Yarick looked at Vel. "You said this was about information, about evidence." "It is," Vel said. "But not the kind he expects." Farron reached for a control panel. "I'll summon security." Yarick moved first. He grabbed the edge of the table and swung it sideways, scattering instruments. Farron staggered back. Vel lunged forward and yanked the power conduit from the restraints. The lights flickered. The Relun collapsed to the floor, barely conscious. "You've made a mistake," Farron hissed. Yarick pulled a blade from his boot. "Yeah, I do that a lot." They dragged the Relun between them, moving fast now. The alarms hadn't started yet, but they would. The corridors were quiet, but too quiet. Yarick's ribs ached with each step, but he didn't slow. When they reached the emergency drop shaft, Vel keyed in a bypass code. The hatch opened into a narrow vertical tunnel with a magnetic lift ring. No time for elegance, they jumped. The ring caught them with a jolt and dropped fast. Lights blurred past. Yarick felt his stomach lurch, then settle. When they landed, they were in the cargo bay's sublevel. "We have 5 minutes before they trace us," Vel said. "The shuttle's still where you parked it?" "No." "It's gone." Yarick stared at him. "What?" "I lied," Vel said. "There is no shuttle." Yarick dropped to one knee beside the Relun. "Then what the hell was your plan?" Vel produced a transmitter from his cloak. "We broadcast." "To who?" "Anyone who listens." Yarick's laugh was dry. "You dragged me into this for a podcast?" Vel activated the transmitter. Blue light spread across the floor, forming a projection. The feed showed the lab Farron, the instruments, the chains. "Dominion doesn't allow internal feeds to broadcast," Yarick said. "They don't," Vel agreed. "But I'm not Dominion anymore." Voices crackled through the air. "Not human, not Dominion, dozens, maybe more." The signal was catching. The Relun stirred. It looked up at Yarick, blinking slowly. "You're safe," Yarick said, though he wasn't sure that was true. The projection shifted. Now it showed other labs, other prisoners. The network was wider than either of them had guessed. Vel turned to him. "You wanted to know if this made a difference. It does." Footsteps echoed from above. Yarick stood. Then let's make it count. They didn't try to hold the bay. Instead, they moved through it, triggering the fire suppression system as they went. Gas flooded the air. Sprinklers doused the electronics. The Dominion guards who arrived minutes later slipped on the soaked floor. They found nothing useful. By then, the trio had vanished into the waste chute, clinging to the sides as the refuse jets fired. Hours later, they emerged in the lower levels of a decommissioned mining platform tethered to a captured asteroid. It was grimy and cold, but no longer patrolled. The Relun slept. Its breathing was uneven but steady. Yarrick leaned against a wall, coughing. "Next time," he said, "we go to a nice, quiet bar instead." Vel crouched beside him. "You're bleeding again." "I'm always bleeding. I should get you to a medic. You're not qualified. I've watched 6 human surgeries on the infostream. That's not reassuring." Vel rummaged through a salvaged kit and pulled out a roll of gauze and a coagulation patch. "Lift your shirt." Yarrick obeyed. The wound had reopened along the edge just beneath the fresh scar tissue. "This will sting," Vel warned, pressing the patch in place. Yarrick gritted his teeth. "You think we need allies," Vel said. "Others, not just us." Yarrick nodded. "You've got your feed." "That's a start. Farron will say it's fabricated. Then we make it impossible to ignore." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft hum of the platform's decaying systems. Eventually, Vel spoke again. "The Prime Overlord will see this." "Good," Yarrick said. "He needs new nightmares." Elsewhere, on a Dominion cruiser docked near the galactic border, the Prime Overlord stood before the main screen. The intercepted feed played in full. He didn't blink. Kelvar stood behind him, silent. When it ended, the Overlord turned to the communications officer. "How many units have seen this?" "Unclear. It propagated across at least 7 internal networks before we began containment." "Containment is irrelevant," the Overlord said. "The truth spreads when it is inconvenient." Kelvar approached. "They're rebels, nothing more." "No," the Overlord said. "They are something far worse. They are compelling." Kelvar's mandibles clicked. "Then we erase them." The Overlord's gaze shifted back to the screen. "No, we watch." Kelvar hesitated. "You want them to continue. I want to see what they do when the galaxy watches back." He stepped away from the console, robe trailing behind him. "You will not understand them if you only crush them." The Relun, whose name, once it could speak properly again, turned out to be Tava, clutched a thermal wrap around its narrow shoulders and stared at the empty plate in front of it like it was an artifact. The starch paste hadn't been flavorful, but it had been warm, and that seemed to have meant something. Yarrick leaned against the wall with a cracked mug of something hot and vaguely brown. His ribs still ached when he shifted, so he didn't shift. The mining platform's recycled air had a slight tang of iron and mold, but it was breathable. "For now, you've eaten, you've rested, are you lucid?" Vel knelt beside Tava, checking a thin scanner. "The sedatives have worn off." Tava nodded, though the movement was uneven. "I remember the pain." "The restraints. That one with the long hands, he's dead," Yarrick said. "Probably from embarrassment." Tava blinked. "You killed him." "No, but he's being investigated by the Dominion now." "When you broadcast that much evidence, it gets hard to pretend it doesn't exist." Vel powered down the scanner. "You were lucky. The spinal probes hadn't reached your memory centers. Another hour and you'd have been past recovery." "I don't know anything worth extracting," Tava whispered. "You were a symbol," Yarrick said. "They don't always need data. Sometimes fear is enough." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the low groan of the platform's hull adjusting to microdrift. After a while, Tava looked up. "Why did you come for me?" "Because you were there," Yarrick said. "That's not an answer." Vel stood. "It's the only one humans ever give." Later, they sealed off the room and activated the atmospheric scrubbers. The filters weren't rated for long-term use, but they could hold for a few hours. Vel had found a cracked Dominion terminal in one of the abandoned storage rooms and was trying to interface with it using a repurposed translator. "Do not jostle the wiring," he warned. "I'm breathing," Yarrick said. "That's about all I can promise." Vel adjusted the interface. If I can override the encryption logs, we'll have access to their internal personnel records. It would allow us to identify who authorized the off-record interrogation labs. Wouldn't they just say it was rogue? They might. But matching personnel IDs to multiple incidents makes it harder to dismiss. Tava pointed to a flickering glyph on the screen. That one, I recognize it. It was stamped on the walls in the room where they kept the others. The others? Yarrick stepped closer. There were more, Tava said. At least 4 species. Some were sedated. Others screamed until their voices broke. Yarrick ran a hand down his face. We can't reach them all. No, Vel said, but we can expose them. They worked for another hour, tracing logs and rerouting subroutines. The Dominion's security protocols were layered, but not immune to physical rerouting. When the interface finally unlocked, the screen filled with access logs. Vel filtered by unauthorized labs and ran a match against known Dominion command structures. 14 labs, he said. 7 still active, Yarrick whistled. That's a lot of skeletons in the closet. No, Vel said. That's a collection. It took another half-day to package the data into a transmission. Vel insisted on broadcasting through a neutral relay station, one of the old Zarnian listening buoys drifting on the edge of the galactic belt. It would delay the message by a few hours, but Dominion sensors wouldn't be able to intercept or jam it beforehand. Yarrick helped Tava into the service pod while Vel powered up the guidance systems. The pod was barely large enough for 2, but it had shielding and a manual override. You sure you want to go? Yarrick asked. Tava nodded. There are survivors from my unit in the Marne Nebula. If I can reach them, we can testify together. You'll be hunted. I already was. Yarrick held out a hand and Tava took it with spindly fingers. There was no ceremony to it, just a quiet understanding. When the pod launched, it disappeared into the dark like a match dropped into the ocean. Vel wiped his brow, one down. We're not going after the rest, Yarrick said. No, Vel agreed, but someone will. They spent the evening dismantling the terminal and scattering the components through various access chutes. Anything salvageable was burned or jettisoned. The Dominion had sensors tuned to fugitive activity, but old tech disguised as scrap often slipped through unnoticed. The next day, a message pulsed through the emergency comms relay. It was short, encrypted, and carried the signal code of the Dominion's central broadcast network. Vel ran the decryption 3 times to be sure. They've publicly condemned the labs, he said. Declared them unauthorized and dissolved. Yarrick raised an eyebrow. That's fast. They want to look clean before the blood congeals. No one dissolves a program that doesn't exist, Yarrick said. Vel nodded. They're scared. Yarrick leaned back against the wall, wincing as his side protested. Good. They didn't celebrate. There wasn't much to celebrate, just a small, sour breath of relief, but it was enough. After 3 more days, they left the mining platform in a salvaged hauler that barely held atmosphere. Vel had reprogrammed its beacon to identify as a civilian craft from the Vryn Trade Confederacy. They drifted past 2 Dominion patrols without challenge. On the 6th day, they reached a settlement station orbiting a dead moon. The station was run by former smugglers turned traders, and they didn't ask questions if you paid for air and kept to yourself. They booked a docking berth and vanished into the crowds. Yarrick got his ribs properly reset by a human medic who didn't ask how the fractures had been treated before. The pain faded to an ache, and the ache to a memory. Vel found a local information broker and sold fragments of the Dominion files for food credits and a place to sleep. The rest of the data was uploaded anonymously to the Galactic Archive, flagged under human intervention, non-combat incidents. By the end of the week, 7 Dominion officers had been detained by their own for conduct unbecoming. 3 resigned. 1 disappeared. The last 3 issued formal apologies unheard of in Dominion hierarchy. Yarrick read the reports while sipping tea brewed from something vaguely floral and definitely toxic in large quantities. You think it matters? He asked Vel. Vel didn't look up from the terminal. It did to Tava. Yarrick nodded slowly. Then that's enough. They stayed on the station for a while, not hiding exactly, waiting, watching, sometimes helping when a transport broke down or a scuffle turned ugly. Yarrick taught a group of traders how to reinforce bulkhead welds using only foam sealant and gilt. Vel learned to cook something that didn't taste like despair wrapped in starch. One evening, as the sunless horizon of the dead moon cast long shadows through the station windows, Yarrick and Vel sat in silence. "You think the Prime Overlord's still watching?" Yarrick asked. "Yes," Vel said. "Then let's give him something worth watching." They never became heroes. They didn't lead fleets or inspire revolutions. But the Dominion never launched another widespread ground invasion. The lab programs evaporated under scrutiny, and more than once when a captured enemy was brought to a human outpost, they were given food before judgment. It was enough. Not because it changed everything, but because it proved it could.